Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
As the government shutdown drags on, missed paychecks, rising healthcare premiums, and ripple effects across the economy are starting to build pressure on both parties. But no one knows how long it will take before that pressure is strong enough to bring them back to the table. Here to break down the politics, the pain points, and the path forward is Deputy News Director from Bloomberg Government, Lauren Duggan. Lauren, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We're looking at the beginning of week 3 of this government shutdown, and things people are saying are not particularly encouraging. Speaker Johnson has said that we're on track to have the longest government shutdown ever. Vice President Vance is saying there's more pain to come for the federal workforce. What are you hearing? What's the update from your seat?
I think pretty much the same. We are dug in on this shutdown. Both sides are kind of holding their ground and saying that they're going to stick to those positions, with Democrats still wanting some sort of action on health care and Republicans saying open the government first and we can have those talks, and, different actions happening in the administration side without very much happening on the shutdown front on the congressional side, which is ultimately where it needs to happen.
So people are starting to get their health care premium notices this month, and the Democrats had hoped that might be a leverage point as people in the exchanges were looking at pretty significant payment increases. Is that having any impact yet?
Not that I've seen, but that's the sort of pressure I think you'll see build. There was one person who did make a difference for, and that was Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican representative of Georgia, who last week took to X and had a post about my leadership has no plan here and my family's premiums are going to go up. I think it might have been her children's, but still the point is, yes, these premiums are going to go up. There is some bipartisan interest in doing something. There has even before the shutdown been a bipartisan bill in the House with some members, Republican members in vulnerable districts, who were keen to do something about this. So I think there is pressure to do something. It's the linking of the two, which is problematic, as I said, for Republicans who, again, open the government and we'll talk, but we'll have to see if that position holds or if there's any movement over the next couple of days.
Also, over the weekend, the president signed an order directing DOD to realign funds so that it could make sure it paid military service members on the 15th of October. That seems to have moved a leverage point as well.
Yeah, a lot of people had the 15th circled on their calendar as maybe a date to reopen the government because of troop pay, but the action the administration has taken to keep funds flowing, to pay the troops, may help with that. I'm sure people on Capitol Hill have some questions about how that's happening and if it's the letter of the law that's being followed, but that'll play out in time, and in the meantime, the troops will probably get their pay. But that had been a point of leverage, I would say. Another point of leverage, though, is the air traffic control situation, watching that longer term, seeing if there are more people calling out or if there are more ground stoppages or disruptions to the system, because that is obviously a big pressure point for people trying to fly across the country, including members of Congress who need to get to their districts and back.
And federal workers who are furloughed at least got a partial paycheck on the 10th of October. Their next one is due on the 24th. So is that the next point at when maybe the forces all combine and folks might decide that we've had enough?
It may be, but it still may not be if there's ingoing pressure on this. The last shutdown, I guess, DOD wasn't really covered because they had a full year appropriations bill when the 35-day shutdown went along. So we'll see if there's pressure there. The talk, too, about no back pay that some people in the administration had floated that wasn't necessarily guaranteed, that obviously ruffled some feathers up on the Hill and elsewhere last week. So we'll see if there's more discussion there. But that will obviously be something that maybe lawmakers will be taking a look at.
You mentioned the air traffic controllers as a follow-on from the last shutdown. The Coast Guard got to be a pretty public issue the last go-round because they're in Homeland Security, not defense, and Coast Guard families who continue to operate really felt the pinch. Do you think that there's going to be any provision in DHS to treat them the same way that DOD is treating active duty service members?
Notably, the president's order was to Pete Hegseth, who's the defense secretary, or you'd say war secretary, and that did not cover DHS and the Coast Guard. So we'll see if there's another order there. We'll see if there's the same level of flexibility maybe that had allowed them to try to do that. So again, more pressure points. The more pressure points that build, the harder it is to sustain a shutdown. But for now, it seems like going into the third week, there's not all those pressure points haven't quite added up to moving the needle.
Pots are simmering, but not yet boiling.
Indeed.
I'm speaking with Lauren Duggan. He's Deputy News Director for Bloomberg Government. Well, behind the scenes on Capitol Hill, some things have been moving forward, Lauren. We got an NDAA out of committee this week.
Yeah, the Senate passed that last week. It had been on the floor for pretty much, I think, 3 or 4 weeks with not much action, very few votes. But the sides came together, got a bipartisan deal, and went through a long list of votes on Thursday night to clear that over the line in the Senate. That bill has to be reconciled with the House before the end of the year. That's the normal deadline. Most of the authorities are calendar year and feed into the funding discussion. But, important things like troop pay in there, military construction projects, some changes maybe to the acquisition system that I know a lot of people will be interested in, and then just workaday issues coming down to the Defense Department personnel policy, things like that. So there are things that they'll have to work out between the two sides. Bipartisan vote, though, I think maybe 77 people voted for it, which is a pretty high number in today's Senate, given how things are so fraught on the other side of other issues. But that's one we'll be watching over the next several weeks as they try to negotiate a compromise and get that done.
Hard to go to conference, though, with the House out of session.
It is. They'll do a lot of the work behind the scenes, even if they don't get to that formal going to conference stage. But that will be, a big thing. There's also spending conference talks out there. So there are these talks about having talks. So we'll see how that spills out.
Well, speaking of having talks, there was talk on the Hill this past week about operations in Venezuela. What did you hear about that?
Yeah, there was a vote in the Senate using the War Powers Resolution, which was a Nixon-era policy that tried to give Congress more oversight. The minority party can force votes if they have enough people on their side, and they did force a vote on stopping the kind of operations against Venezuelan boats. It fell short of what it needed, with most Democrats voting for it, and Rand Paul as well, most Republicans voting against it. And that, I think, is just a sign, though, of the discussion about the policies and things that seem outside the scope of normal operations. That means they can go forward for now if you can't cancel them using that War Powers Resolution. But lingering questions still about what authority is being used and whether it's, fully constitutional. I don't think that debate will end, even if the vote didn't accomplish what its backers wanted to.
Well, Lauren, Halloween is at the end of the month. We've talked a lot about tricks. Are there any treats out there maybe that we could hope for?
I mean, the mechanics of the Senate are moving forward. NDA was a big win for them. They also confirmed 107 nominees in a block, agency heads, ambassadors, U.S. attorneys. That kind of freed up the backlog that had dominated most of the year. Committees have been doing the same, working through there. So there is stuff happening on Capitol Hill, at least on the Senate side. The House, as you mentioned, is pretty much gone for now. They said they'll come back when the shutdown ends, or at least if they're going to bring people back, give 48 hours notice, something like that. They're not notably coming back today, even as the Senate returns from what had been a recess week. So, yeah, there's some things out there to hang your hat on, but still a lot left to figure out.
Well, I've been speaking with Lauren Duggan, Deputy News Director for Bloomberg Government.
Thank you so much.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.